our buddy Mark Schlereth. Stink, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing, Dave?
Doing really good. We got another big shocking move here. We were trying to decide whether or not this the trade of Geno Smith by the Seahawks to the Raiders, or was that more shocking than the Russell Wilson trade? And always good stuff to talk about here in Seattle.
Yeah, no question about it. And I was actually shocked. I like Geno Smith. I think Geno Smith is a good player. I know he can spin it. I know the protection stuff and the pressures and all that kind of stuff was, made that job a little bit more difficult. But I was kind of shocked that the Raiders made that trade for him, and was really interested to see exactly what they were going to do, and was pretty pleasantly surprised. I was kind of shocked that Minnesota didn't re-sign Sam Darnold and that he ended up in Seattle.
Mark, where do you think this leaves the Seahawks offense just for this upcoming season here in 2025? I mean, they have Sam Darnold for a few years, but what's your perception of them going into this season?
Well, I mean, obviously, you got to fix what has gone on with the offensive line as far as protection, as far as being able to run the ball. I know Klint Kubiak well. I know that whole staff and what they're going to try to do in regards to that. So I love the system. And the other thing that's nice about the system is that, Sam Darnold, that's what Sam Darnold played in when he was a backup in San Francisco and then went to Minnesota and played in that. So this will be the third year in, with the root of that system being the same. So I think that's big. Obviously, you're going to have to see, from a passing standpoint, kind of the weapons that they accumulate and how they put that run game and mix it into play action. One thing about Klint, he'll do a really good job of marrying the play action to the run game and take some pressure off their passing game that way. But obviously, for a guy like Sam Darnold, it has been a downgrade when it comes to the weapons he had in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson and Addison and, Hawkinson and all the Sins, all those guys. Everybody was a Sin over there. And now you're going back with Njigba's kind of your main guy. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that goes.
Yeah. Tell us about Sam Darnold and what you saw. And I know that, did you do a couple of games with Sam this last year?
I didn't do any Minnesota games this year. I didn't get them on the schedule, but I will tell you this, I did a couple San Francisco games at the end of the season before last. It was really interesting talking to Kyle Shanahan. I spent both Sundays on the field, and I talked to Sam Darnold 2 Sundays in a row for about 20 minutes apiece. And he got one start against, I think, the Rams, the very last game of the season. But they raved about Sam Darnold. And I'll just take you through the story a little bit because I think it's a really cool thing. First and foremost, he went into the league for the New York Jets, and at that time, I believe Jeremy Bates was the offensive coordinator. Jeremy Bates was kind of a disciple or kind of created or worked with Peyton Manning. So they tried to put that offense in. And Kyle Shanahan said to me, he goes, and I quote, "There's one guy on the planet that can run the Peyton Manning offense, and that's Peyton Manning." So instantly he goes into a situation where he's not going to have success. And so that falls apart. Then he goes to Carolina. Well, Matt Rule takes over, running another collegiate system. And so Matt Rule ends up getting fired, and Steve Wilkes takes over, and Ben McAdoo is the coordinator that time. And so it's year 4, about 9 games in, before Sam Darnold was ever put in a progression-style offense. Where you're going, hey, we're reading this progression 1 to 2 to 3. We're reading the front side is, a zone beater, the backside's a man beater. Like those things, he wasn't running those things until year 4. And so he goes to San Francisco, and one of the reasons he chose San Francisco, and I think this is cool because he had other opportunities to go elsewhere and compete for a starting job. And he said, no, I want to come to San Francisco because I want to learn how to play offense. I want to learn NFL offense. I have not been given the opportunity. So he takes less money to back up Brock Purdy in San Francisco And Brock told me, and I quote on this too, been invaluable in my development. The guy has been such a great teammate, and and just what he does to help Brock prepare. And so here's a guy that kind of humbled himself and said, man, I need to learn how to play this game. And then you see him go to Minnesota last year, and for 17 or 16 games, he balled out. They ended up being 14-3. They lost the last game of the season. They would have won the division and been the number one seed in the NFC playoffs. And it's crazy to me because I look at it and go, okay, if Sam Darnold wins either one of the last two games, either the last game of the season or the playoff game, I believe they re-sign him to be their quarterback.
Yeah.
So you're making a decision off of one game, essentially, and the fact that you drafted a guy that you don't know if he can play or not, which feels like football hubris to me. Like, I can make any quarterback play well because my system is so good, which, like, I spent enough time in the NFL to know that that's not how it works, right? You got to have good players. So we'll see. But I'm surprised that Sam Darnold didn't re-sign in Minnesota. I think that's a mistake by the Vikings, and good for the Seahawks.
Well, what do you think happened in those last two games, Mark? What did you see? I mean, obviously, we had the play-by-play on their radio about, he's holding on to the ball and, he's got to get rid of it. What did you see in those last two games?
Yeah, I think there was some of that. I think that that there was the holding of the ball and not seeing it as well. And I also think that you got into two situations in which in that Detroit game you got a lot of pressure, a lot of blitz, and defensively, they gave up a bunch of points, so you had to play that way. There's always the complementary nature of football is such that, hey, man, if your defense is giving up points, at some point you got to put the ball in the air. And at some point, everybody knows what you're doing. And so, those things end up costing you. And ultimately, I think there's some of that. He didn't play well in those two games. But I'm telling you what, week 16, go out to week 16, they win that game, and, they hoist him on their shoulders, and they're spraying with champagne in the locker room. I mean, he was loved there. And he played really well all season long, and they ended up playing two teams that were better than them, and they got beaten, both of them. And he didn't play particularly well, but I would look at the body of the 16 games that he played pretty well in, as opposed to the body of work he had in two games against playoff type teams.
Mark, one thing you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I know all throughout the year when you come on with these guys, you talk about this, the marrying the pass and the run of what Klint Kubiak is going to bring in here. Do you feel like this will help the Seahawks' current offensive linemen? Because we've kind of kicked around the idea, well, they have some holes on the interior. They haven't made a signing as of yet. But where do you see this offensive line improving with Kubiak's system?
Yeah, play calling is a big part of protection. Man, play calling is a big part of being able to run the ball. There's so many coordinators in this league. There's so many people that are just like, oh, we want to run it, we want to run it, we want to. And as soon as you have, a few plays, 4 or 5 plays that aren't, breakout runs or 2 and 3 yard carries, people throw their hands up and just give up. And, and it's endemic of the way people call plays in the league in general. So you've got to have a commitment to it. You got to believe in what you're doing. I also, truly believe that you've got to have kind of your staple of runs that you're going to always execute, and you're going to be better than people who are trying to defend you. So, like, all those things tie in, and then ultimately, when you do that well, and you can tie that stuff together, and you can make it look identical, when you can really make a defense feel like, oh, this is a run. And all of a sudden you pull up and play action, that's the difference. And Dave will tell you, I mean, playing linebacker, there are some teams that really sell it well and get you. And then there are teams that give you lip service when it comes to the play action stuff. And that, to me, is the difference between those teams that really understand it, know how to marry it, know how to make it look identical, and run it well. And so, like, those are, like, I'll tell you a story. We get them playing Super Bowl 32. We beat the Green Bay Packers, and we're in the midst of a game. We 17-17 ball game. We kick off to them. They fumble, right, and we get the ball on the kickoff, and we're going in for a a score, and we run a play, and we had put in trap. We never ran a trap. Like, we didn't run trap at all, like that style of run. But we put trap in because somebody got the Packers on trap pass. And, and that we really thought our coaching staff really trap pass could get them in a red zone situation, right? So we get the ball back on the kick return, and because they fumble. And the first play we call out of the huddle in that situation is trap pass. Elway goes back to pass and throws a pick. And so kind of no harm, no foul. We get done. We win Super Bowl 32, 31-24, and everything is hunky-dory. And I'm sitting on the last bus, and Kubiak gets on. Clint's dad gets on and gives me a big hug, goes, "Hey, Super Bowl champions." And what do I say? Being the snarky turd that I am, I said, "Hey, Koob, just a point of order." I go, "Before you call a trap pass, you ought to call the trap." he said, "F you, stink." And he went to the back of the bus and sat down. So that's how we celebrated together. But just a point of order. And so I'm sure Clint has heard the story, and he knows, you've got to establish the run before you can run that play action.
We'll ask him if his dad told him that story. Yeah, that ungrateful offensive guard questioning my play calling in a Super Bowl champion game. Hey, I thought, now that I've processed it, the two trades with Geno and DK, and first of all, Mark, I mean, on our show, that was those two guys the most polarizing as far as, what people think, and it's a wide range of, he sucks to, there's nobody like him in the NFL, but DK Metcalf, to me, I thought there's nobody like him. I don't know that there's a receiver that is that big. I didn't think that they used him as much as they should have last year with Grubb's offense. But was that more shocking to you, or was the Geno Smith trade something that surprised you more?
Probably the Geno Smith trade because, just watching him on film, the way he throws the ball, I just think he's really good. Now, like I said, there were a lot of other extenuating circumstances where offensively they weren't very good last year. Some of that is, the offense that you're running, and bringing in a collegiate coordinator to run it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at Seattle film. I think the other thing about DK, and this was interesting, going back a couple of years of big numbers, 1,300 yards and whatever. Back when Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator, just like he didn't really run a full complement of the route tree, right? So it was go balls at wherever he came from, Mississippi State or wherever it was. It was go balls, and there was a very limited route tree. And I know that DK busted his butt learning how to run the route tree, learning how to get in and out of breaks, learning how to not give away routes and route combinations. He got a lot better at that. And it does feel to me in that offense that he didn't get utilized the way he probably should be utilized. He's just a unique individual and talent. So, but still, I just know how this league operates, and having a quarterback and a guy that can play, that is the one thing you have got to have to be really good in this league. And that surprised me because I'm a Geno, I guess I'm a Geno apologist, a Geno case may be, but that one shocked me a little bit more.
Yeah, does it kind of feel like you either have to be truly sure whether you're going to pay a guy franchise quarterback kind of money or kind of move on? Because we saw the massive deal for Josh Allen and then Geno Smith. It sounds like he wanted close to top of the line money. Is this the nature of the league now where you either have to shell out a lot, or like it seems like the Niners are going to do with Brock Purdy, or maybe salvage what you...
Yeah, I mean, there's I've always said you want to sign guys, early, right? So you want to make sure that once you have a guy in your building, you develop that guy. And I think we saw a lot of that in free agency. A lot less free agents hit the open market. There were a lot of, 11th hour deals done for guys to stay within their organizations. But I've always said if you find the guy, you develop the guy, you work the guy, you need to reward the guy and get him done early and set the market early, because obviously every year the cap is going to go up. The money's going to go up because the TV deals, the revenue. Some of the money is just insane. Like the money they pay to mid players just blows my mind. Like it's crazy how the money has evolved. But the bottom line to me is, I understand if you don't think a guy is like a top-notch player and you don't want to pay that guy. I get that. I totally understand that. But again, it's the market. You're going to have to pay market value for guys, even though you don't like it. And so now, there may be something else that they don't like about Geno, whatever the case may be. I'm not in that building, so I don't know. But I get feeling like, God, we don't want to pay that dude. Like we don't want to pay that guy. We think he's an average player, but I would say that there are a lot of average players getting paid. So sometimes you just gotta pick your poison, I guess.
Hey, from afar, sometimes you've called games here. As far as getting to know Schneider, does John Schneider kind of stand out to you as a guy that's pretty aggressive? I mean, maybe it just seems that way because we're here. And then I think you add Mike Macdonald. I mean, I said all year I felt like he's got some stones, man. I mean, he hires 2 inside backers in the offseason, then he trades one and cuts one about midway through. They get Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight in there, and it was just a very aggressive move that, I feel like a lot of GMs and a lot of coaches will just fix it in the offseason. And but is his style, Schneider in particular, does that stand out to you as him being pretty aggressive? Like he knows exactly what the value is in his mind, and he moves on it quickly.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, he is that guy. And I think the other thing, they're in lockstep. I feel like Seattle's in lockstep about what they want to be and how they want to build the team. And I know that probably wasn't always the case with John Schneider and the way, Pete Carroll and he operated. So, not that it wasn't a great relationship, but I don't think it was exactly always on the same page with things, and it feels that way to me. The only thing I always concern myself with is with defensive coaches, Dan Quinn kind of broke the mold last year in Washington. Usually, and this is a usual thing, most defensive coaches are going to err on the side of protecting their defense, and so that's always a concern. Like, can you impede the progress of a quarterback by operating that way where you're always protecting your defense? Now, Dan Quinn was all out all the time with Jaden Daniels. He's like, no, we're going for it on 4th down. We're doing things differently. It was really cool to watch that with Dan Quinn. So it'll be interesting to see how Macdonald kind of operates this, but certainly from the outside looking in, and I don't know him and I have never sat down with him, but on the outside looking in, man, like it just feels like that dude knows what he wants, how he wants to build a football team, and it does feel like the two of those guys, he and John Schneider, are in lockstep on the way they want to build this thing. And I think the trading of Geno Smith and and getting draft picks and the way they're going to build, like I feel like they have a plan, and they're executing that plan, which is cool. It's cool to see that.
Mark, what do you make of the offensive line market this offseason? We saw 2 really good ones not even hit free agency. Well, Trey Smith, franchise tag, and then Joe Tooney, I guess just got traded. But you get past that top tier, and fans out here wanted guys like Drew Dahlman or Will Fries, and they get big deals. Is that what you're going to have to pay to get someone like that? Or is the only good way to get better on the offensive line maybe to make a trade or to draft and develop one?
Yeah, I think the big thing is once you have a good offensive lineman in your organization, you try to keep those guys. And ultimately, in today's game, it's really hard to develop young players because you never put on pads. It's hard. That position is exceptionally across the board is exceptionally hard. And, you got to rely on one another. You got to play for one another. You got to be able to communicate with one another. You got to be able to, the whole thing is it's all 5 becoming one. And it's hard to do that when, you're not in pads and you're not doing the things that, to me, that need to be done to be good. So when you find a guy that can play, usually you keep that guy. Like I'm looking at a guy like Laremy Tunsil. I mean, think about it. He got traded from Miami. They got 2 first-rounders. They got, second-rounder. Then he gets traded from Houston, who gave up the 2 first-rounders and everything. He gets traded from Houston now to Washington. They get multiple second-rounders. And the guy's been traded twice now for just a king's ransom. But he can play. Now, he had a bunch of penalties, but, the guy can play. It's really interesting. I think you have to draft. You have to hope to be able to draft and develop. And most of the guys that are allowed on offensive lines to hit the free agent market usually are not that good. But I always say this about free agency anyhow, especially the first wave of free agency. You're usually spending A+ money on B- players. Most guys have some flaws in their game, whether it's personality issues, whether it's injury issues, whatever the case may be. Most guys have some flaws in their game.
Well, Mark, we really appreciate it, man. I know this is a little extra here because usually you come on during the season, but it's nice to know we can check in with you and get some good information. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Anytime, Dave. You guys take care, man. We'll talk to you soon.